My name's Lila Gray, and 5 years ago, my own family kicked me out with nothing but a backpack and a bruised heart. Today, I own a billion-dollar company, and guess who came crawling back? Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. 5 years ago, I stood in the middle of our wide marble hallway, shaking as my mother screamed at me. My stepfather, Warren Hale, paced back and forth, holding a printed bank statement like it was proof of murder. He said I had stolen $20,000 from his firm. I didn't even have $20 to my name. I didn't take anything, I said, my voice barely coming out. My mother, Tessa, didn't even look at me. She crossed her arms, her diamond bracelet glinting under the chandelier light. Don't lie, Lila, she said coldly. We have evidence. Warren saw the transfer under your login. Behind her, my half-sister Mara leaned against the stair rail with a smirk that told me everything. She'd set me up. She'd always hated me, said I wasn't a real Hale. She'd borrowed my computer the day before, claiming she needed to print something for school. I didn't realize until too late what she'd done. Mom, please, I tried again. You know me. You raised me. But she just turned her face away, as if even looking at me was shameful. Warren threw a small duffel bag at my feet. You're 24. You're old enough to figure things out. Get out of my house. The words hit harder than anything I'd ever felt. I looked at my mom one last time. She didn't say a word. Mara followed me to the door, whispering, "Guess you finally got what you deserve." Her perfume made me sick. I wanted to scream, to tell them the truth, but I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already chosen who to believe. Outside, the night was cold. The mansion lights glowed behind me, warm and golden, like a world I'd never belong to again. I sat on the curb, holding my torn backpack, the only thing that was really mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Mara. Good luck out there, sis. I wanted to cry, but anger pushed the tears back. I realized in that moment that I couldn't count on anyone, not family, not love, not anyone but myself. If they saw me as a thief, then I'd build something so big, so powerful, they'd choke on their regret. I looked up at the dark sky, my breath fogging in the air, and whispered to myself, I'll never beg them again. That was the night I stopped being their daughter and started being something else. Something stronger. And though I didn't know it yet, that same night, the night they threw me out, was the night I began building the empire that would one day make them wish they'd never opened that door. The nights were long, and the cold found every hole in my old Chevy. I parked behind a small diner off Route 9, hiding between delivery trucks so no one would notice I was living there. My back ached from sleeping in the driver's seat, and my clothes always smelled faintly of grease and coffee. Every morning, I washed dishes for the diner in exchange for a few crumpled bills and whatever food was left at closing time. Eddie, the owner, was a quiet man in his 50s who had seen better years. He didn't ask questions about why I was there, and I was grateful for that. I kept my head down, worked fast, and tried not to think about the warm bed I'd lost. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that house, the lights, the marble, my mother's cold stare. Anger burned hotter than hunger ever could. One night, near closing, the old coffee machine started sputtering. Eddie cursed under his breath. It was the only thing that kept the truckers happy, and without it, business would dip. I asked if I could take a look. He hesitated, then handed me a screwdriver. I took the back panel off and saw that one of the wires had come loose. A few minutes later, it was humming again. Eddie stared like I'd just done magic. Didn't think you knew machines, he said. I don't, I answered, wiping my hands. But I figure if something's built by a person, another person can fix it. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh people make when they're surprised. After that, he started asking me to help fix other small things. The broken freezer light, a leaky faucet, the old jukebox that hadn't played in years. I didn't know much, but every time I solved a problem, I felt something spark inside me. Maybe I wasn't worthless after all. One night, after closing, Eddie sat across from me in a booth, sliding a plate of pie my way. You ever think about building something for yourself? He asked. I shrugged. Don't have much to build with. He pointed a fork at me. You got a brain, don't you? Build something that can't be taken from you. Those words hit hard. I didn't answer, but I thought about them for days. When the diner lights went off and the town went quiet, I sat in my car with a notebook I'd found in the trash. My flashlight barely worked, but it was enough to sketch. I drew boxes and panels, shapes I didn't have names for yet. I thought about the dark nights when I couldn't even charge my phone, about people like me who couldn't afford big electric bills. What if there was a way to give light to anyone, anywhere? Something small, simple, cheap. The idea started as a spark, but it kept me warm through the nights. I didn't know how to make it real yet, but I knew this. No one was ever going to hand me a future. I'd have to build it with my own two hands. The workshop was a crumbling garage behind an auto parts store. The roof leaked when it rained, and the floor smelled like oil, but it was mine. Eddie had introduced me to a guy who lent me a few old tools, and I worked nights after my diner shifts, soldering, wiring, and sketching. Every sound echoed. Every spark lit the darkness like a promise. The first version of my project sat on a crooked table, a square of metal and wires that looked more like junk than invention. Still, it was the start of something real. I named it SunGrid. I whispered the name like a secret, as if saying it out loud would make it stronger. When I realized I couldn't do it alone, I dug through my old college contacts. People who'd once studied with me, shared notes, borrowed my pens, laughed at my dorm jokes. Most didn't answer. A few sent polite messages, sorry, busy these days. Hope you're doing okay. Their silence told me everything. I wasn't someone worth replying to anymore. One night, a name I hadn't seen in years popped up on my screen, Noah Reeves. Back in school, he'd been sharp but kind, the sort of guy who saw potential where others saw trouble. He'd heard through someone that I was building something weird. We met at a cheap diner off the highway. He wore a faded hoodie, and his eyes lit up when I pulled a small SunGrid panel from my backpack. It's not much yet, I said, setting it on the table. He looked at it closely. You made this? On your own? Mostly. It's a small solar unit that can power 1 or 2 devices. Cheap to build, easy to fix. He leaned back, smiling. You know this could change things for a lot of people, right? I wasn't sure anyone had ever said something like that to me before. Noah didn't ask why I was living in a garage or how I got here. He just asked how he could help. That night, we became a team. He took care of the business side while I kept building. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to hope. Quiet, fragile, but real. A few weeks later, while waiting for a delivery, I overheard 2 customers talking outside the diner. You hear about the Hales? One said. That daughter of theirs, Mara. She's running the marketing branch now. Real genius, they say. I froze. The name hit like a slap. I walked back to the garage that night and sat staring at the glowing wires of the SunGrid. Genius. That was what they called her now. She'd stolen from me, lied about it, and somehow landed in a higher seat at the same firm that destroyed me. My hands trembled, but not from anger, something deeper, colder. The same fire that had kept me alive in that car started burning again. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted to outshine every one of them so completely that they'd have to say my name just to breathe. And I would. By the time I started reaching out to investors, I'd already lost count of how many doors had closed in my face. Every meeting felt the same. Polite smiles, fake interest, then the familiar line. We'll be in touch. No one ever was. My notes were full of crossed-out names and numbers that led nowhere. Still, I kept trying. I didn't have anything else to lose. Then came Grant Millen, a small-time investor known for taking chances on underdog. Getting a meeting with him took 2 weeks of unanswered emails, 3 phone calls, and 1 desperate voicemail that ended with, I can prove it works. He finally agreed to meet. His office was a cramped space above a tire shop, not the kind of place that screamed money, but it was better than nothing. Grant sat behind a cluttered desk, scrolling through his laptop as I started my pitch. I explained the idea, the tech, the potential market. He didn't look up once. When I finished, he sighed. You're smart, kid, but you're not the first person to talk about cheap solar. What makes yours different? I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, his laptop froze and the screen went black. He swore under his breath and jabbed at the keys. This thing's been dying for weeks. Can I try? I asked. He leaned back, arms crossed. Be my guest. I unplugged the charger, flipped the machine, checked the port, and found a loose connection. I borrowed a paper clip from his desk, bent it, and secured the wire in place. The laptop came back to life in seconds. Grant raised an eyebrow. You do that often? He asked. Fix things that are supposed to be broken? I smiled. Every day. Something shifted in his expression, curiosity replacing doubt. He leaned forward, tapping the desk with his pen. You've got guts, I'll give you that. All right, Lila. I'll back your idea. But don't make me regret it. I shook his hand, and for the first time, I felt like the world had opened a crack just wide enough for me to step through. With his funding, Noah and I rented an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The walls were rusted and pigeons nested in the rafters, but we scrubbed the floors, set up our tables, and hung a hand-painted sign, Greytech Energy. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We worked through nights, testing, failing, rebuilding. Orders were slow at first, tiny homes, local shops, but every success built another step. Then one night, a violent storm swept through the city, knocking out power everywhere. When the rain cleared, I got a call from a woman whose home still had lights. She said one of our panels had kept running through the whole storm. Then another call came, then another. By morning, news trucks were parked outside the warehouse. Reporters wanted to know who had kept half the neighborhood alive when the grid went dark. Standing there in the rain, watching the glow of our panels light up the street, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. 2 years passed faster than I ever thought they could. Greytech was no longer a dream scribbled on scrap paper or a workshop covered in dust. It had become a company people whispered about in meetings, featured in magazines, and quoted by analysts who'd once ignored my email. Our panels powered schools, clinics, and entire neighborhoods. Every headline that mentioned Greytech Energy carried my name beside it. Lila Gray, founder and CEO. The first time I saw the new office tower with our logo gleaming across the glass, I stood on the sidewalk and just stared. It was tall, clean, impossible to miss, and only 3 blocks away from my stepfather's firm. I hadn't planned it that way, but fate had a sense of humor. From my top floor, I could see the Hale Building's rooftop sign every morning. I never looked away. One afternoon, a glossy invitation arrived, a charity gala hosted by the city's business council. My assistant left it on my desk with a note. You've been named Innovator of... The name on the sponsor list caught my eye. Hale Financial Group. That night, I chose a black suit sharp enough to draw blood. My hair pinned, heels steady. I walked into the ballroom under chandeliers that looked just like the ones I'd stared at the night they kicked me out. The crowd turned as I entered. Some recognized me, some whispered my name like it was a headline. And then I saw them. My mother stood beside Warren, pearls at her neck, smile frozen the second her eyes met mine. Mara hovered nearby in a silver dress, clutching a champagne flute. For a heartbeat, none of them moved. Then Mara looked away, pretending not to know me, her laugh too loud, too forced. I walked straight toward them. The crowd parted without a word. Warren was the first to recover. He extended his hand, polite, cautious. Lila, it's been some time. I took his hand, cool and firm. Funny seeing family here, I said softly. Haven't seen you since you threw me out. He blinked, mouth tightening. That was a misunderstanding. We've all made mistakes. I smiled. You're right. Some of us fixed them. Tessa cleared her throat, stepping in. You've done well for yourself, she said, her tone caught between pride and discomfort. We read about you often. I looked at Mara, who still refused to meet my gaze. Guess some of us made better use of our names, I said. Before anyone could answer, a photographer approached. Ms. Gray, could I get a picture for the press? I turned toward the camera, the flash catching their stunned faces in the background. Later that evening, as speeches began, Warren's voice trembled slightly when he congratulated the young minds shaping the future. He didn't look my way, but I knew he felt my presence like a shadow he couldn't escape. When I left the gala, the air outside was cool, sharp, electric. The city lights reflected off the glass towers, mine among them, and I realized something simple and sweet. They finally saw my name again. And this time it was untouchable. The message came through my assistant one Monday morning. Warren Hale wanted to schedule a private meeting to discuss a potential partnership. I almost laughed when I read it. For 2 years, not a word from him or anyone connected to that house. Now suddenly he wanted to talk business. I told my assistant to confirm. We met in a downtown conference room with a view that looked out over both of our office towers. He arrived early, wearing the same kind of polished confidence he'd always carried, though now it felt thinner, forced. Lila, he said, standing to shake my hand. You've built something remarkable. Greytech and Hale Financial could do great things together. I smiled politely, sitting across from him. Could we? I was under the impression Hale Financial specialized in numbers, not energy. He chuckled. Business is business. There's power in unity. Think of it as a merger, not a takeover. I caught the flicker in his eyes, the kind of look people wear when they're drowning and pretending to swim. I'd heard through the grapevine that Hale Financial had been losing clients to newer, cleaner firms. He didn't want a merger, he wanted a rescue. The door opened, and Mara stepped in like she owned the room. She wore confidence like a costume, that same practiced smile she'd used the day they'd thrown me out. Lila, she said, voice smooth as glass. It's been too long. I leaned back in my chair. Not long enough. Warren gestured for her to sit. Mara will help manage marketing once we finalize the merger. She's been handling corporate communications brilliantly. She gave me a sugary grin. I always admired your work, you know. You were just ahead of your time. The words were honeyed, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. She wasn't here to praise me. She was here to make sure her father didn't lose control. I studied her, letting the silence stretch until she started fidgeting. So tell me, I said softly, do you ever think about that night? The one when I was accused of stealing from your father. Her smile stiffened. That's ancient history. Still, I pressed. I've always wondered how you pulled it off. You borrowed my laptop the day before, didn't you? Her eyes flickered. Just a second, but enough. She laughed too quickly. You act like it was me. Then, realizing her mistake, she froze. I tilted my wrist slightly, making sure the tiny red light on my smartwatch kept blinking. My voice stayed calm. You just said it was you. Color drained from her face. Warren turned to her, confusion twisting into anger. Mara, what is she talking about? I didn't mean. I stood, smoothing my jacket. You wanted a merger, Warren. I'll think about it. They both called after me, voices tight with panic, but I didn't turn back. Outside, I stopped to check the recording. Her words played perfectly clear through my earbuds. I smiled to myself. Let them think I was considering the deal. What I was really planning was something much bigger and far less forgiving. The merger presentation was held in a grand conference hall filled with cameras, reporters, and investors. The Hale Financial logo gleamed across the projection screen, and the air buzzed with quiet chatter and the sound of expensive suits shifting in leather chairs. I stood near the back at first, letting Warren enjoy his moment. He looked proud, confident, ready to spin a story about innovation through unity. When it was my turn, I walked to the stage as the lights dimmed. Warren smiled tightly, gesturing toward the podium. Everyone, please welcome the visionary behind Greytech Energy, Ms. Lila Gray. The applause was polite then. I stood under the lights, letting the room settle into silence. Thank you, I began. It's an honor to be here today, standing beside the people who once inspired me to understand what real business integrity looks like. Mara sat in the front row, head held high, pretending not to notice my tone. Warren shifted in his seat. The projector flickered behind me, showing slides he'd prepared, charts, numbers, projections. All empty talk. I took the remote from the podium and clicked to the next slide. The screen went black. Then Mara's voice filled the room. You act like it was me. There was a pause, and then her voice again, sharper, trembling. I didn't mean. The audience froze. Warren's head whipped toward his daughter. The recording played on, every word echoing through the speakers, every lie unraveling in front of the cameras. Gasps spread like a wave. Reporters began whispering, pens scratching, phones lifting to record. Mara's face drained of color. Turn it off, she shouted, standing, her voice cracking. She's twisting it. I didn't move. This was recorded during our meeting last week, I said calmly. I thought it would be fair to share the truth before signing anything. Warren slammed a hand on the table. You planned this. I looked him straight in the eye. I plan everything. The investors began to murmur, glancing between each other, their trust dissolving by the second. One man stood up, saying loudly, I'm pulling my shares until this is clarified. Others followed, filing out, their faces a mix of disgust and disappointment. Mara tried to speak again, but her voice broke into sobs. The cameras caught every second. Warren stood frozen, his jaw tight, his empire cracking right in front of him. I turned back to the microphone. I don't merge with liars, I said evenly, my voice steady and clear. I replaced them. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. I left the stage as reporters surged forward, shouting questions neither of them could answer. By morning, the headlines covered every major outlet. Greytech Energy acquires Hale Financial. Their stock had dropped overnight, while ours tripled. When I walked into my office later that day, Noah was waiting with coffee and a grin. So, he said, what's next? I looked out the window toward the Hale building, now stripped of its logo. Next, I said quietly, we build bigger. And for the first time, the victory didn't just feel sweet, it felt final. The fall happened faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, Hale Financial's name vanished from the business pages and reappeared in court filing. Investors demanded answers, lawsuits piled up, and whispers about fraud turned into public accusations. Warren tried to hold press conferences, but no one believed a word he said. Each time he faced the cameras, his voice sounded smaller, his confidence eaten away by panic. The regulators came next, digging through every record, every missing dollar. That's when my mother's name appeared in the reports. Tessa Hale had signed off on internal adjustments years earlier, documents that covered up Mara's theft. The discovery was enough to open an investigation. Overnight, she went from being a respected socialite to a woman whose face appeared beside headlines about deception and complicity. Mara disappeared completely. One morning she stopped showing up at work, and by evening, her office was empty. No one knew where she went, and no one asked. Her once perfect image had turned toxic. The girl who used to smirk from magazine photos was now just a shadow, forgotten, erased by her own lies. As their world burned, mine only grew brighter. Greytech kept expanding, signing contracts, building new facilities, drawing investors who once wouldn't even return my calls. For months, I watched the Hales crumble from a distance, saying nothing, doing nothing. I didn't need to. Gravity handled the rest. Then, one afternoon, my real estate agent called with a strange offer. The Hale Mansion, my childhood home, was being sold at a foreclosure auction. I didn't even blink before saying, buy it. Cash. 2 weeks later, I stood at the top of the long driveway. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint faded, the windows dull. I walked inside without hesitation. Dust coated the marble floors, and silence filled every corner. The grand staircase still curved upward like a spine, the same path I had taken that last night before everything shattered. My footsteps echoed as I climbed to my old room. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Everything was still there. The bed with the pale blue sheets, the desk by the window, the faded photographs tacked to the wall. It was as if time had stopped the moment I left. I sat down on the edge of the bed, running my hand over the worn comforter. The quiet settled deep in my chest. There was no rush of victory, no grand sense of justice, just stillness. The kind that comes when every fight has ended and there's nothing left to prove. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and I could hear the faint hum of the city in the distance. My city now. I looked around one last time before standing up. The girl who had once been thrown out of this room didn't live here anymore. I locked the door behind me and walked out into the empty hall. The house was silent, but this time, the silence belonged to me. It was a gray afternoon when the guard called to say 2 women were waiting at the gate. I wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors never showed up unannounced. When I stepped outside, I saw them through the iron bars, my mother and Mara. Both looked smaller somehow, drained of everything that used to make them untouchable. Tessa's hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. Mara's clothes were wrinkled, her eyes hollow and red. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of memory, but then I heard my name. "Lila," my mother said, her voice shaking. "Please." I walked slowly toward the gate, my heels crunching on the gravel. They stood there clutching each other like castaways. I didn't open the gate. I just looked at them. For a long time, none of us spoke. The silence was thick, the kind that used to hang between us at dinner when she'd pretend everything was fine. Finally, Tessa stepped forward. "We've lost everything," she said quietly. "The house, the accounts, everything. We didn't know where else to go." Mara stared at the ground. She didn't say a word, just rubbed her arms as if trying to hide from the cold. I could still see the faint outline of the girl who had smirked while I was thrown out. Now her confidence was gone, replaced by something fragile and lost. I kept my voice even. "Why come here?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're still my daughter," she whispered. "I know I failed you, but please don't turn your back on us." "Not now." Her words hit something deep inside me, but the feeling didn't last. I'd spent too many nights wishing she had said those words when they mattered. Now they were just sounds carried by regret. "You're still my daughter," she repeated, reaching toward the gate. I took a step back. "You made that impossible," I said quietly. Mara finally looked up, her face pale. "We didn't mean for things to go that far," she murmured. "We were scared." "Dad, don't." I cut her off. "You both made your choices. So did I." I turned and walked to my car parked by the gate. They called after me, voices breaking, but I didn't stop. I opened the glove box, pulled out an envelope, and walked back to hand it through the bars. "There's enough in here for a motel and food for a while," I said. "It's the only thing I'll give you." Tessa clutched the envelope like it was air. "Lila, please." I didn't answer. I turned, got in the car, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing there, 2 figures framed by rusted metal and a sky that looked as empty as they did. As the gate closed behind me, their voices faded. The road stretched out ahead, long and quiet. I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth seeing anymore. The city stretched out beneath my window, a web of lights and movement that pulsed like a living thing. From this height, everything looked calm, steady, almost silent. My office was quiet except for the hum of the air vent and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I leaned back in my chair, watching the skyline shift from gold to deep blue. The Greytech logo glowed on the next tower over, bold against the night. My name sat beneath it in silver letters, a name no one could take from me now. The building below buzzed with life. Engineers, designers, and managers worked late, some just like I had once worked, hungry, determined, chasing something bigger than themselves. I'd hired people who reminded me of the person I used to be, the ones who showed up without polish but carried fire in their eyes. They were the heart of Greytech, and every success we built carried their fingerprints as much as mine. Sometimes I walked through the production floors and saw them bent over prototypes, their hands covered in grease and hope. I never told them my story in full. It didn't matter. What mattered was giving them what I never had, a chance that didn't depend on a last name or a favor from someone powerful. I turned my chair toward the wall of glass again, letting the reflection of the city fall across my face. The lights blurred slightly, softened by exhaustion and memory. I thought about that first night, the cold air, the weight of a backpack, the sound of a door slamming behind me. I remembered the silence that followed, the one that used to feel endless. It had taught me everything. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Noah about a new expansion deal overseas. Another milestone, another win. I smiled, typed back a quick approval, and set it aside. For once, there was no urgency in me. No need to prove, no need to push. I had already done what I came to do. The world saw a billionaire, a founder, a woman who turned scraps into an empire. What they didn't see was the years of being invisible, the hunger that shaped every decision. I built this life with bare hands, with long nights, and with a quiet promise whispered in the dark. Standing, I walked closer to the window. The reflection stared back, stronger, calmer, untouchable. Somewhere out there, the people who once called me nothing were learning how it felt to be forgotten. I didn't need to see them, didn't need to hear their apologies. The only sound I wanted was the steady rhythm of the city I had claimed as my own. I rested a hand on the cool glass, watching the lights flicker below. A whisper left my lips, soft and certain. They taught me what I never want to become. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. The kind that stands taller than revenge and quieter than pride. I turned off the lights, leaving only the city's glow behind. The empire I built alone didn't need noise. It already spoke for itself. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away for good, or should I have given them another chance? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories.